Tonight's meeting is called Empire in Motion, U.S. Regime Change from the Banana Wars to Venezuela. So it's about how the United States has repeatedly meddled in other countries' governments, whether that was through force, covert action, or economic pressure, and how that practice became normal policy and the long lasting impacts that it has. I want you guys to participate tonight, not just listen. I'll be asking questions throughout, and I want you to put your chats in the or your thoughts in the chat, and I'll read some of those responses out loud as we go. A couple of ground rules just for this discussion. You don't need to be an expert. You don't need to agree with everything or everyone. Just be respectful, and there are no wrong answers. The goal tonight is to understand how regime change became normal US policy and how the consequences don't stay overseas. They come back through migration, war fatigue, political polarization, and the erosion of democratic norms at home. I want to say a huge thank you to our volunteer Ken, who helped research tonight's topic. So what do we mean by regime change? Before we go any further, let's ground this in our own understanding. When we say regime change, we don't just mean invasion. We mean any effort to remove, destabilize, or control a government so that it aligns with US interests. That can include military force, CIA coups, backing dictators or proxy forces, sanctions that collapse economies, and diplomatic isolation. So when you hear US regime change, what country or event comes to mind first? Go ahead and drop those in the chat. Iran, Iraq, Mexico, Venezuela, Vietnam, Panama, Chile, Cuba. A lot of Venezuela. Obviously, that one's going to be top of mind. Puerto Rico, Colombia, Orban. And now one more. In your gut, do you think regime change usually makes people's lives better, worse, or just different? I see a whole lot of worse. Yeah, I'm with you there. Susan says different. Terry says different. And some say it can depend on the regime. So let's take a look. To understand how this became normalized, we have to go back to the early 1900s. Between roughly 1898 and the 1930s, the US repeatedly invaded and occupied countries in the Caribbean and Central America. Historians call this period the Banana Wars. And the goals were not subtle. They were to protect US corporations, control trade routes, and prevent governments from acting independently. US Marines rewrote constitutions, labor movements were crushed, governments were installed or removed at will. This wasn't seen as controversial at the time, it was treated as how great powers behave. And here's why that matters. It normalized the idea that other nations' sovereignty is conditional, that it's revocable if it conflicts with US interests. And that mindset never disappeared. Here's another question for you. Which do you think drove US intervention in other countries more? Anti-communism, corporate power, or the fact that the US already had a huge military and had a habit of solving problems with military force? For the last one, you can just put military habit. A lot of corporate power, some resources, oil, all of the above, money, military and resources. We got military habit. Oh, someone got it. Chiquita banana. That's why they're called the Banana Wars. Let's go a little bit more in depth into Central America. This is where regime change stops being occasional and it becomes systemic. This section matters because it explains today's migration crisis far better than cable news ever will. In the early 1950s, Guatemala elected President Jacobo Arbenz Guzman, who proposed land reform. Not socialism, not revolution, land reform, breaking up massive land holdings so that people could farm. A U.S. corporation, United Fruit Company, UFC, which is now known as Chiquita, had become the world's largest banana exporter by controlling Guatemala's railroads and ports for 50 years and holding vast land holdings there. UFC had strong interests um, in preventing land reform. They spent $500,000 lobbying Washington and the public, claiming this was communism and the US must take action. That's roughly equivalent to $6 million in today's money. And because the Cold War predisposed the Truman administration to see the Guatemalan government as communist, the CIA responded by running a psychological warfare campaign, training proxy forces, supplying arms to a small insurgent army, and overthrowing the elected government in 1954. What followed was not stability. It was 36 years of civil war during which US backed military regimes carried out massacres and genocide against indigenous communities. 93% of atrocities against civilians were committed by the US backed military. Over 200,000 civilians were killed. Before tonight, did you know that the Guatemala land coup was about land reform? A lot of people didn't know that. I'm glad that we are all here together. Yes, Kat is horrified. Me too. The fact that our government decided to do this in the name of protecting a corporation or corporate interests, and that 200,000 people were killed as a result and by military forces that we backed is disgusting. Now let's move on to El Salvador. By the late 1970s, the country was marked by extreme socioeconomic inequality, economic shocks, and growing labor and popular movements. People were demanding reform. Further economic instability due to the 1973 oil crisis sparked the growth of a left wing insurgency. Again, fearing communism, the US response was to frame this as a Cold War threat and back a military dictatorship. The Carter administration supported the revolutionary government junta, the JRG, in hopes of promoting stability in the country. Nearly $1 billion in US aid flowed to security forces. Death squads operated openly, and entire villages were wiped out. This wasn't chaos, it was order enforced through terror. Refugees from this crisis that ended up in Southern California would form the MS-13 gang. So, does this sound more like defending democracy or defending power by protecting the interests of the existing elite to maintain US influence? Defending power. Yeah, defending the elite. I believe we are all correct on that. So let's take a look at Honduras. Unlike its neighbors, Honduras did not erupt into a full scale civil war. But that doesn't mean it escaped violence. Instead, it became a platform for U.S. operations in the region, a militarized staging ground for U.S. operations. Like Guatemala, Honduras was a banana republic in the early 20th century. Its economy was dominated by U.S. companies such as UFC, which is Chiquita, and the Standard Fruit Company, which is now Dole. Like El Salvador, Honduras became increasingly dependent on U.S. foreign aid during the Cold War period, leading to the emergence of guerrilla groups such as the Cinchoneros. Sorry, I think I just butchered that, but Cinchoneros. The United States established military bases and carried out CIA operations. Elite units like Battalion 316 were trained by the CIA to identify, abduct, torture, and disappear political opponents. These were not isolated incidents. This was state policy. Dissent was made impossible. The U.S. maintained a large army base in Honduras during the Reagan administration as a means to maintain military control in Central America. Honduras was kept stable, but stability here didn't mean safety or justice. It meant control through fear. Over decades, repression didn't go away. It accumulated, leaving a society deeply scarred. Communities learned to live under constant surveillance and threat. The patterns of violence set in these years would ripple into neighboring countries, shaping migration and political dynamics for generations. How does seeing repression happen without a full civil war change your understanding of U.S. involvement in Central America and how it relates to what we're seeing in the U.S. today? I know, Kat, they taught us wrong. Yankee imperialists go home. Yes, the complete disregard for Latina lives. Money and power run the show. And now we blame the immigrants. Yep, exactly. Trying to convince Americans of a single narrative. Who does that remind you of? Trying to rewrite history or gaslight the entire country. So, do we blame all these Central American people wanting to escape the suppression and poverty? I exactly, Jen. The one of the main reasons I wanted to do this meeting tonight was to show exactly how the migration crisis from Central America really got started, and how we fueled that, but now, of course, it's not our problem. So in Nicaragua, the story is familiar, but with a twist. In 1979, a US backed dictatorship collapsed. The Sandinista National Liberation Front government that followed was far from perfect. There were mistakes, shortages, and tensions, but it enjoyed widespread popular support. People had hope. The U.S. response was not to support diplomacy or constructive engagement. Instead, it was a proxy war between the U.S. and Cuba. The Reagan administration condemned the Sandinista government for joining with Cuba in support of Marxist revolutionary movements in Central America and authorized the CIA to arm and train the remnants of the previous dictatorship's National Guard as counter revolutionary anti Sandinista forces, or Contras. Congress even passed laws banning aid to the Contras, yet the administration found ways around it, secretly funding armed opposition through arms sales to Iran. And this became the Iran Contra scandal. Here's the lesson. When democracy produces the wrong result, meaning a government that isn't aligned with U.S. interests, US policy does not step back. It adapts to destroy that government rather than support its citizens' choices. The message was clear: popular will mattered less than maintaining US strategic control. So when you hear about Iran-Contra and US intervention in Nicaragua, does that feel more like defending democracy or defending power? A lot of people saying power, big oil grab, power, 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 just destroying other countries for money. Yes, exactly. How many of you had heard of Iran-Contra before tonight, but didn't know the truth of what happened? Me too, until Ken did this research and I got to work on this meeting with y'all tonight. All right. So, decades of violence and repression produced mass migration from the 1980s onward, which accelerated in the 1990s and the 2010s. This was a direct consequence of US policy in the second half of the 20th century, resisting socialist regimes in Central America, which generally wanted to improve economic conditions for working people. The conflicts created or exacerbated by the CIA also caused humanitarian crises. The formation of MS-13 and Barrio 18 gangs in Los Angeles, which were later exported back to Central America through deportations. MS-13 was started in the 1980s by refugees from the El Salvadorian Civil War as a means of protection against pre-existing gangs in Southern California. They later evolved into a more sophisticated criminal organization and expanded recruitment to include members from other Central and South American countries. The vast majority of undocumented Salvadorian migrants to the US in the 1980s were not granted refugee status by the Reagan administration. MS-13 members who were deported established cells in El Salvador and other countries in areas where there was previously no gang activity at all. MS-13 activity in Central America is now a major driver of migrant caravans to the US southern border today. US led or backed regime change also led to chronic instability, leading to recurrent migrant caravans, ongoing US border and asylum system strain. This is the single largest sustained migration consequence of US regime change policy, and the effects are still unfolding. Does this historical perspective change how you think about migration from Central America and the current immigration crisis? Me too. Really, the only other factor that's driving migration at this level can be the environment, causing people to be unable to farm in countries, but it's not nearly on the scale that what regime, not nearly on the scale of what regime change has done. We are the villains, Morgan. All right. So now let's talk about the 2003 war in Iraq. Iraq offers a sharp illustration of what happens when regime change becomes explicit policy. In 2003, the US invaded Iraq, claiming there were weapons of mass destruction that never existed, an imminent threat that was never real, and a mission to spread democracy. None of these claims held up, but the invasion went ahead anyway. The consequences were immediate and devastating. The U.S. dismantled the Iraqi state, and the army was dissolved, leaving millions unemployed but armed. Civil service employees were purged, erasing institutional knowledge, and schools, courts, and government institutions collapsed. Violence exploded, not because Iraqis were inherently violent, but because the structures that held society together were removed. Out of that chaos came sectarian civil war, millions displaced, and the rise of ISIS. ISIS's emergence was not spontaneous. It was fed directly by U.S. detention camps where prisoners were radicalized, power vacuums created by the invasion, and occupation driven grievances that fueled recruitment. My first experience at a protest was in 2003. A few days after George W. Bush declared war on Iraq with his shock and awe bombing campaign, pictures started to come in of the children who were maimed or killed by these bombs. I was only 21, but I knew that I had to do something. I had just moved to Boulder and I didn't know anyone there, but I was so angry and so heartbroken that I decided to make a whole bunch of signs and stand on a corner of Pearl Street by myself, hoping that people would see the signs and join me. But no one did. I stood there with my signs for half an hour and then I started to lose hope. And then around the corner came a huge march of people. I ran to meet them and I was enveloped with this amazing feeling that I was not alone. There were thousands of people who were just as outraged as I was, and they were doing something about it. And I spent my life trying to replicate that feeling for other people. That's why I started Solidarity Warriors, and why we take the lead in organizing protests like No Kings 2 and now No Kings 3. So, some questions for you. When you think about the Iraq War, what emotion comes up most? Anger, grief, exhaustion, betrayal, something else? Sad, anger, disgust, shame, anger and betrayal, grief, betrayal, sadness. We have created so much destruction, enabled in part by the lie of spreading democracy, manufactured fear, and the lies promoted by white supremacy and illusion of separateness. Everything, all of those feelings, distrust, vengeance, all of the above. Disgust. So many people hurt, and for what? America is the one who was first to let a nuclear drop. Why do we think we have the right to search for nuclear bombs? Exactly. We cause death and destruction and then punish others for reacting to our damage. Now they've replaced the imminent fake threat, weapons of mass destruction, with a new imminent fake threat, quote unquote illegals. They're bringing the forever war home to us, which is Imperial Boomerang. Yeah, exactly. All of these things connect, and all of them can be traced back to something that the U.S. started. And what world or personal event brought you to your first protest? Civil rights, the Iraq War, Vietnam War, Black Lives Matter. My parents took me to the WTO protest in Seattle when I was about 9 or 10. Also, another person for the Iraq War, the ERA. Kat says I'm old. Trump, good one, Beth. The Vietnam, civil rights, these are all good ones. Every reason that got someone involved in organizing is a good reason. Um, Susan, that's okay that it took until the second Trump administration. You're here now, and we're all here together, and we're going to keep fighting fascism until this country is a democracy that we can all be proud of, where everyone is safe, and everyone's lives are valued. I saw a couple people said the Women's March or women's rights. Vietnam protesters, thanks for hanging in there for literal decades, Katie says. Philando Castile, the war we shouldn't have been in and could not win. Black Fox Nuclear Power Plant in Oklahoma, 1978. So a lot of us are here for the same reasons, and a lot of us were brought here for different reasons. And it's so important that we recognize that each of us brings something unique to this fight, and what brought us here and originally lit that fire in our hearts is something that we can always hold on to. So let's take a look at Afghanistan. Afghanistan shows the limits of combining regime change with nation building. The story begins in the 1980s. The US initially supported the Mujahideen and eventually the Taliban as part of a proxy effort to fight Soviet forces during the Cold War. Weapons, training, and funding flowed into the country, helping insurgent groups resist the Soviet occupation. And then after 9/11, the US returned to Afghanistan, this time overthrowing the Taliban, and the mission expanded endlessly with unclear objectives. The US tried to build a centralized state with new government institutions, a Western style military trained to defend the government, and legitimacy through funding rather than public support. Instead, the Afghan government became dependent on the US, not accountable to its people. And when the US withdrew, the government collapsed within days. The Taliban returned to power, and millions were displaced in a matter of weeks. What were you told the goal of the Afghanistan war was, and when did it start to feel unclear? And Morgan, I'll check the updates and see if there are any Palantir actions coming up. So to answer the question, Miss Al said drug money. To save the girls, you can't go to school. I bought that one too, Terry. Still unclear. Susan said she always thought of it as an oil war to fight the Taliban. Revenge for 9/11. And Diana said, my goal was keeping my children there alive. Oh my gosh. To kill bin Laden, who did 9/11. Yes, so that was my main impression of what we were doing in Afghanistan, why we went into Afghanistan the second time. And then it all got quite murky after that. Control of the opium trade. That's a good one, Aaron. So Afghanistan teaches a brutal lesson. You can't import legitimacy. You cannot occupy your way to democracy. Now we're back in the present day, and the pattern of intervention we've been tracing takes a dramatic and deeply controversial turn, as if this wasn't controversial enough. Earlier this month, even though it seems like a year ago, The United States launched a large scale military operation against Venezuela involving airstrikes and other strikes on military targets in and around Caracas and other parts of the country. During that operation, U.S. forces captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores and brought them to the United States to face charges. An action described by many governments and international observers as a bombing of Venezuelan territory and the kidnapping of a sitting head of state. This was not just economic pressure or covert action. It was open military force, carried out without United Nations authorization or congressional authorization under U.S. law, and condemned by governments across Latin America and around the globe as a violation of international law and Venezuelan sovereignty. Supporters of the operation argue it removed a leader they view as authoritarian and tied to corruption and trafficking. And yet, Trump now supports the vice president, who is still tied to all of the corruption of Maduro. Critics call it a return to 20th century interventions, military force imposed by a much more powerful state on a smaller neighbor, justified in part by rhetoric about security and democracy, but executed through bombing and extraordinary rendition. History suggests that this kind of approach, whether sanctions, covert action, or direct military intervention, tends to have the same consequences. Sanctions hit civilians first, squeezing ordinary people more than elite. Hardship does not guarantee regime collapse or democratic reform. Instability spreads regionally. And migration follows those waves of instability, displacement, and fear. So, based on everything tonight, from Central America to Iraq, Afghanistan, and now Venezuela, what mistake do you think the US is most likely to repeat? All of them. Greed, above, all of them. Bullying, leaving the country more destabilized than it already was. Taco slush fund. Ben says they refuse to write his name. Unwinnable war with no clear objectives. Unstable country. All of the above. Creating more displacement that creates more global chaos. All of them inserting themselves, making countries dependent on them. Control and theft of resources. Creating a false narrative. Massacres, mischaracterizing military intervention, all of the above, and continued escalation of violence on its own people. Katie says China will just take over the whole Western Hemisphere once Trump takes literal dumps on it. Attacking others under the guise of democracy and people's rights when it's actually about oil and destroying economies for financial and power gain for the few elite involved. Very much agreed. No real leadership, supporting radical groups, making more countries unstable, kidnapping and creating chaos to intimidate and gain power. Trump is just following the former corruption, harm and suffering of others. Now they just want to take what they want. Defense contractors are winning big with these open checks. Yes, that is very, very true. Anything because a liar slash felon and authoritarian lying to us and wanting control. Another part of the largest heist, extract resources, overspend, siphon money out, and leave it worse than ever. Disappeared people, underestimating the people. Susan agrees that China is going to win the globalization war if we keep going at this rate. I added the if we keep going at this rate. I feel the mistake implies these were not intentional choices made by the US government. Fair enough. Is it Orion or Orion? I'm not sure. You'll have to let me know. Well, there are plenty of mistakes that we can repeat. Orion. Okay, got it. So after more than a century, the pattern is clear. Regime change removes governments but cannot build societies. It creates instability that outlives the intervention. It comes home through migration, endless war, and political decay. The question isn't whether the US can intervene again. The question is whether we're willing to keep accepting the consequences or demand something different. And I know all of you are here because you want to demand something different. So, Sean, were there other questions in the chat that we should go over?
I didn't see any really. Mostly you covered every one of them.
Okay, great. If anyone has a question or would like to make a comment, feel free to uh, keep throwing them in the chat and I can read them, or you can raise your hand. Ben, go ahead.
Hi, Tiffany. Just to jog your memory, I was the one on the bridge a week ago that asked for Tupac.
Oh, yeah.
So this doesn't have a whole lot to do actually with the topic of today, although it's all very interesting. I'm a big student of history and did a really good job of kind of summarizing what happened. But one of the things that really worries me that's going on right now is we all know that what's happening in Minneapolis, even what we might call a victory, which people are calling some of what's happening in the last couple of days a victory, we all know that all that is really a retrenchment. All that is maybe resources might leave Minneapolis, maybe ICE resources might leave Minneapolis. But that doesn't mean they're going away. And
Mhm.
and the Front Range is an obvious target because of the election officials. Tina Peters in jail, and Trump hates the elected officials in Colorado. So the Front Range, especially, but most of the blue part of Colorado is an obvious target. I know that there are already people in Durango being taken away, but in particular, and there's stuff happening in Denver too, but it's not a major target yet, but it will be. And so the question I have is, what are we doing to learn the lessons of the resistance in Minnesota? I know that there's training for observing. I know that there's, but what they're doing, and there's some other kind of, it feels like it's kind of piecemeal what you're bringing up and saying, go to this, go to this QR code, go to this QR code. But the beauty of what Minnesota is doing is they mobilized hundreds of thousands of people with this decentralized network of people that they've trained hundreds of thousands of people. And I don't want our state to be ground under a heel before we organize that way.
Yes.
Am I making sense?
Yes, you're definitely making sense. I agree with you 100%. So, there are groups that are organizing similar, like hyper local networks, of people to do ice watch, and, be in connection with their communities. I can plug you all into those types of networks if you just send me a DM on Signal. Let me drop that Signal chat link in the chat again. So yeah, if you join our Signal group and then just send me a direct message, and I can get you connected with, there's a main like Denver area group, and then you can find your local group from there.
Because
Um,
that's what I think will build momentum for us. Is wherever they go, there is an organized, decentralized presence blocking them.
Yes. So there are also already networks in place, like the Colorado Rapid Response Network, who's putting on that training. You can always Google the CORN hotline, CORRN. If you suspect you're seeing an ICE raid, please call them and they will send out trained confirmers. They also have other people who are observers, and they do various trainings throughout the year. Most of these groups are ramping up their training
Mhm.
schedule so that we can get more people trained. There is an amazing group called We Keep Us Safe. Were you here the other week when we had a guest speaker from We Keep Us Safe?
No, unfortunately, I wasn't.
All right, I'll pull up that YouTube meeting so y'all can watch it. And basically, what they're doing is they're a grassroots initiative to help organize proactively and effectively to protect our community members from being illegally and inhumanely kidnapped by ICE. They've developed a hub of resources and best practices. I'll put their link tree in the chat
That's
too.
fine. I have a resource
And
too, by the way. I have a resource too, by the way. Have you heard of
yes,
people over papers? That
it
that
sounds familiar.
yeah, that's iceout.org. It's essentially a map of the United States with verified sightings in as little stick pins that you can just pull
Oh,
up.
you did send me that. Okay, so
Yeah,
they do have people that verify them.
yeah. And you can
Okay,
and when you're on the website, you can actually submit a report, and then they verify.
okay, okay,
Yeah,
very cool. So they must have
yeah,
a very large network as
yeah.
well.
Huge. Yeah.
But the We Keep Us Safe folks are putting together what they were calling whistle kits, but now they're calling them ICE ready kits because
Ooh.
they have a variety of essential information for allies and for immigrants, and they can be distributed with or without a whistle depending on the community preference. And Solidarity Warrior's involvement with the whistles is that you can order the free whistles on our website. And I'll drop that link in the chat. So you can go on there and order free whistles, know your rights cards, which are also called red cards. And then we have ICE as not welcome here window clings that are great for businesses because they have a QR code that has know your rights information. Um, excuse me. So we're part of a network of 3D printers throughout the country. We're not printing them, but what we do is they send us 1,000 or 2,000 whistles at a time, and then we ship those out in smaller batches of 10 to 100. And then those are going all over the country. So we're sending them a lot to Colorado, but also Minneapolis, South Carolina, Los Angeles. So they're going all over. And we were originally supplying We Keep Us Safe with whistles, but finally just put them in touch with the folks that we get the whistles from because they were ordering, thousands. They're putting together literally thousands of these whistle kits at events that they have, and then getting them out to communities. On that website that I dropped in there, they have canvassing tips. It's great if you can go through one of their trainings, or it looks like there's actually a volunteer sign up form on the website now, so they support volunteers in self-organizing within your area and collaborating with existing organizations. You can assemble and distribute ICE ready kits, support mutual aid networks, and help make sure students get to school safely, and more. So that's kind of what you're talking about with working within your local area. So fill out that volunteer form on the We Keep Us Safe website if you want to get involved with them. So yeah, that's some of the things that we're doing to get prepared. We are definitely learning all we can from Minnesota. Luckily, they are amazing at posting videos. And if you missed the Indivisible or the No Kings call, I think it was Monday night. I will find that recording and send it out because that went over some know your rights information specifically regarding like videotaping ICE agents. So um, they were talking about blowing whistles can technically be considered impeding an officer. That's what they try to point to as people saying that protesters are breaking the law. If you are videotaping, it's really important that you back away if they tell you to back away and you say, I'm backing away, officer. But keep your video rolling so that people can see that you are backing away from them. So de-escalating is really important. I know sometimes we all want to be like, well, I have the right to record. This is, I have the First Amendment right to blow my whistle. And it's a lot better, especially with the horrendous way that they're reacting to folks, to de-escalate the situation, but continue to document it. Document as much as possible. Did that answer the question? Awesome. Aaron.
Yeah, that's funny you just said that. I was gonna tell everybody that on Monday the ACLU led a rapid response training with no kings, and I was gonna send that to you. But um, everybody on this call right now, when you get off, you're gonna get a text message or an email that said, "How did you like it?" If you respond to that, it's gonna ask you to host your own indivisible event. Anybody can do a rapid response training using that video from Monday. All you need to do is get a library. If you have a library card, you reserve a room in a library, and then you post that date and time. Saturdays in the afternoon are usually the best time, Sunday afternoon sometimes, but a lot of people go to church and are sick after that. So Saturday, 3 to 5 p.m. is a good time. Get with the library, get that, try to get a guest speaker if you know somebody in law enforcement that is anti-ICE or anti, unlawful behavior. And then that's it. That's all you need to do. Every single person on this call right now, I've already done it. We had 33 people show up. We're having, we've had ICE in Tulsa, Oklahoma for 30, 40 years, as long as they've been around. I've seen it forever. They don't go around with the cameras and do all the showboating like they do elsewhere, but this is important everywhere. So I just want to encourage every single person right now to do it.
Thank you, Aaron. That is a great call to action. And if you check out our YouTube channel, we do have meetings about how to organize a protest. If you ever have questions, feel free to reach out on Signal. As we start organizing No Kings 3, it might take me a little bit of time to respond, but I will get back to you and answer your questions as best I can. So here's the link to our YouTube channel. Thank you, Sophia. I appreciate it. Sean, did I miss other questions while I was talking?
Tim said he has a 3D printer available if someone directs
Awesome.
him.
Yes. Tim, if you are on Signal, I guess first of all, all right. So for 3D printing, you'll want to get on Signal if you're not on there already, because that is where the 3D printing group is. They will supply you with patterns and give you information on where to ship the whistles. They will help you pay for shipping. There are some companies that are donating the filament in some cases. So that would be amazing. If anyone with a 3D printer wants to go ahead and join our Solidarity Warriors Signal group, and then send me a direct message and I'll connect you with those folks.
And Stephanie asked, does the red card help?
Yeah, so the red cards, here's one right here. They're all over my house. So these are instructions for if ICE or police are at the door. Don't open the door. Say, I do not give you permission to enter or search. Ask them to slide the warrant under the door. The warrant must have your name and be signed by a U.S. magistrate judge. If not, don't open the door. Then if ICE or police stop you outside your home, say, have I done anything wrong? Am I free to leave? If they say you're free to leave, get the hell out of there. You can say, I do not wish to speak with you or answer questions or hand you documents. I do not give you permission to search. So you are not required to hand your ID over to a police or an ICE officer unless you are being detained. So you can, in addition to asking like, am I free to leave? If they say no, you can say, well, then am I being detained? And if they are not detaining you, then you don't need to hand over your ID. Some people ask when you go to a protest, is it better to just leave your ID at home? I do, but it depends on your situation. So the pros and cons are great. You get arrested and you don't want to tell them who you are, so you don't have your ID on you and they can't figure it out. The con is that if they do take you to jail, it's going to be harder. It's going to take longer to get out. So those are, yeah, up to you. And then also, if ICE or police detain you, do not sign anything, say nothing except, I wish to remain silent, I wish to speak with a lawyer, I wish to make a phone call. And then there's the website usrights.org on here. On the Colorado cards, there's the corn hotline that we were talking about. And then on the back, it's in Spanish. So these are definitely very useful. I know they hand the same information out outside of the immigration courthouse as well as other know your rights information for folks who are in deportation proceedings.
Okay, we have another one. I've heard ICE in Denver are you leaving Ace of Spade cards in detainees' cards.
Yes, so we did hear confirmed reports of that in Eagle County, which is where Vail is. So I think it was Ben mentioning, a few raids in Colorado. The raids are already ramping up. So there were raids in Eagle and Thornton that I heard about last week, and I'm not even part of the Rapid Response Network. And yes, in Eagle County, they did leave Ace of Spades cards, from what I understand, with contact information for ICE and the geo detention facility in Aurora. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm sure someone knows more about this than I do. I've heard two things. I've heard it was done in Vietnam, and I've heard it was done by the KKK, and they're called death cards. If anyone knows more about that and wants to chime in, please do.
Yeah, they've been used all over. The CIA had a deck of cards for Al Qaeda, happened in Vietnam. It's very antagonizing and evil. I also just wanted to say I put the website in the chat for free red cards.
Thank
You have to be an
you.
organization, and I'll put it back in there because it's kind of gone up there. But you can get 250 at a time if you have an organization. You're supposed to be a nonprofit, but you can kind of BS it. So you could say indivisible, or something, and more than likely they'll send them to you. And they're glossy little business cards,
Oh, I
Spanish.
didn't know you could get those online again.
Yeah, I'll send it. I'll
For a
send it to you.
while, you weren't able to get them, I think, because there was such a high demand. Great.
There is. So get in there soon. I've gotten 750 so far. It usually takes 2 weeks to get them.
Yeah, we have somebody that prints them here, so these aren't like super glossy, nice ones. They're still nice, basically like a business card.
Cynthia asks if ICE breaks into your house, are you allowed to protect yourself?
That is a good question. We do have standard ground laws in Colorado. I am not a lawyer. I am a paralegal, so I can get in big trouble for giving any kind of legal advice. So I'm going to say check out the standard ground ordinance or the standard ground law in Colorado. You can just Google it. I would Google standard ground. CRS, which stands for Colorado Revised Statutes, and you can actually read the text of the law and see what it says and report back. But probably, never mind. I'm not going to speculate.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
would say it depends on where you live, because obviously we have people outside of Denver or outside of Colorado on the call. So
Mhm.
really, you need to check your local laws. That's the most important.
I'm just going
Yeah.
to chime in here. It is absolutely your right to defend yourself, but do not get it twisted. They will kill you if you do. Like it
Yeah.
is legally your right to use your Second Amendment to protect your Fourth Amendment, but if you engage with them, you will not leave alive.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Aaron. I didn't even get that far in the thought process.
yeah, it depends really on where you live, because I've lived in states where you don't have a right to until they've actually entered the home.
But
In
yeah, Aaron,
Texas,
you
you can
made a
shoot
very
someone coming through your window.
Yeah, Colorado has some interesting case law on that too. But Aaron, you made a very good point that you will not leave alive. And someone asked in the chat about volunteering. Thank you for volunteering for No Kings 3. We literally just found out at 1 o'clock this morning that the date would be March 28th. So I haven't put together a volunteer form yet, but I will put that together before I send out the follow-up email. And Sarah, how are you doing?
Great. Really, really, really busy. Somebody's heading to Minnesota on Friday, so I have to get her things. That's why I was busy earlier. Get her things to take with her. I'm reading Nazi Dog Whistle as the Ace of Spades card. So what is the purpose of it here in the United States? Ace of Spades and the detainee cards. I've not heard of these. So what's behind it? What's the use of it? What's the purpose? The good, bad, and
It's intimidation, basically. So I'm just gonna let's see, let me see if I can find an article here in Colorado.
so if somebody hands out an Ace of Spades card, that's an intimidation card.
It's not handing it out. What they're doing is they're putting it in the windows of the cars after they've abducted people from the cars. It's an echo of what soldiers did in Vietnam and in Nazi in the Second World War as an intimidation tactic. It has a long history.
So it's them marking their spot that they took somebody.
Right.
And what's
Yeah.
the detainee card?
I'm not sure.
Oh, I thought you're
Well,
so I
they leave a
was just
card when they're being detained. After they've detained someone, they leave that card there so the family and everybody in the community knows that they've got them and they're coming for them next. It's their calling card.
wow.
But the cards that they left in cars in Colorado had contact information for ICE and the geo detention facility.
Got it. So I'm going to throw this out there. I've been asking this all year long with different groups. Erica Chenoweth talks about, the 3.5% and a static or growth of, in order to get these people out of office. But in her book, she also talks about an end goal, and you have to have a plan. I know that we all in our mind have an end goal, but is the plan, is there any set real plans? Because I don't see these people leaving even if we have 5% in the streets. I just think that the power hungriness and the control, this man's never leaving, first of all. The orange creature, but the group in total. So is there like, hey, this happens and we do this until that?
Yes. So you're right. Just because 5% of the country is in the streets, that wouldn't make Trump leave. But the reason that we're trying to get to that 3.5% is so that we have more connections to the pillars of support that are propping up the regime. So I'm not going to remember them all offhand, but that's things like business, education, religion, the military, and police. So, as we all, as protesters and resistors, get more involved and have more people, each of us has personal connections to people that might be in one of those pillars, that works at a university or that is a police officer or in the military. And so that's how we can start to put pressure on those pillars. And that's what brings the regime down. It's not that we're waiting for Trump to walk out of the White House, because it's never going to happen. You're right. But once he doesn't have the support of anything he needs to run the government, they won't be able to continue doing what they're doing. And that's when another government can step in. We support a democracy. There are other groups out there that don't. There are groups that want to see a socialist country or a communist country. And I noticed that a lot of young folks are part of those groups. And I had to remind myself that when I was 18, I was an anarcho-syndicalist. So what that means is basically that union workers should run the country. These are all supposed to be like decentralized systems with no, head leader. And the problem is, in practice, they all end up as dictatorships when there's that power vacuum. That seems to be what happens. So we're still fighting for democracy, and we're hoping we come out on top.
Is there a red line?
A red line as far as what?
What's it going to take to get everybody to stay in the streets until change happens?
No
I hope that
elections.
we're no elections. All right.
That okay.
That is
Yep.
not historically accurate, though, Tiffany. I mean, that there are plenty of examples where elections were canceled and people did not go out into the streets. I mean, three and a
No,
half
no.
percent. Yeah, 3.5%.
I'm saying here in America, as
Yeah,
Americans, as people that live here on this land, are these groups coming together and saying, here's our red line on this, on this, on this, like how many deaths of Americans, how much brutality, how much criminal action that is taking place on a daily, but how much that's what I'm asking is,
yeah.
have Tiffany, have you gotten together with Ezra and Leah and other groups, 5051, all of them around the country? Are you guys getting together and saying, look, we seriously are going to draw some red lines, and at this point, this is when we're going to call everybody and we're staying in the streets until change happens? Because I know that things are only going to get more and more dangerous. I've been saying this since last February, actually. But have you guys been getting together? Have you guys been discussing serious red lines?
So I think even if the groups have red lines, that doesn't bring the people out into the streets. What
No,
brings
but you guys will
people,
voice it just like, after Renee Good. And then all of a sudden everybody was like, yeah, we're in. But it's not going to keep us in the streets because nothing's really been set up just yet to whet everybody's taste buds to stay out there, especially with these extreme cold temperatures.
yeah. So when you say keep us in the streets, you mean literally like everybody camping out until Trump leaves?
Just like other countries when they're like, we're done. It's that red line is, we're done. This is
Yeah.
our country. We're not going home until we get to take our country back. so to
I
say.
think every time we hit that point, like we thought we did with Renee Good, another step happens. And so what has to happen is that it has to hit home for some people. It has to touch them personally. So for some people, that was the shooting of a white woman who was a US citizen. That's what it took for a lot of people, even though 2025 was ICE's most deadly year in decades. 32 immigrants were killed in custody last year. And so most people didn't even know that that happened. So it has to be something that touches your life that you can relate to. And unfortunately, it's taking a lot longer than those of us who have been in this fight for a long time want it to. But we have to remember that revolutions don't happen overnight. A lot of them take years. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. So we have to be prepared for that. The national groups are working together. So the No Kings Coalition is pretty broad. I know it involves the ACLU, Indivisible. I'm pretty sure 5051 is part of it at the national level, and a whole bunch of other groups. So they are working together so that we can coordinate mass national protests. I would like to see them more frequently. Um, I think for organizers, it's nice that we have 2 months to plan this thing, but I think that's too long. There, as far as staying in the streets, I mean, people may not be camping there, but there have been multiple protests per day in Denver since at least since Alex Pretty was killed. But it's yeah, so the protests are ramping up here at least, and I'm sure in other cities as well.
Yeah, not here in Missouri, not yet. No, they're not talking about stay. They're saying, okay, go do your 2 hour, your 4 hour protest, and then, kind of that's an it thing. And that's why I was wondering if there's any talk about stay.
There has not been any talk on that level yet.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Cooper? You're oh,
Working?
there you go.
Okay, I was like, is it working? Doesn't seem like it's working. Hi, thanks. I just actually wanted to pull in a little bit into that conversation too, because I think what I'm also particularly looking for, I've been looking for a while, is a group that really is talking about not just how do we stop this moment, but how do we stop like this from recurring again? Because it will.
Mhm.
This is not the first time in America's history this has even happened. I mean, this is time and time and time again, these types of things have popped up throughout time, and resistance is the only people resisting is the only thing that has ever slightly changed it. But of course, the other problem is that we also need, I mean, I'm pushing for like the fact too that we cannot depend on our democratic leadership either. Personally, the people who are in democratic positions right now, these are a lot of corporate Democrats, and they
Mhm.
posturing morality, but they don't act. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm outraged, but then they still go and vote for a funding bill that is funding DHS. So, do you know? I know there's Run for Something, and unfortunately, I'm too old to like really do much with that because it's for 30s and under. But if you are 30 and under and you're ever interested in going out and getting involved, Run for Something is great. So, do you know any organizations that are also pushing to like, we need new leadership in the Democratic Party as well? We need people that are really going to start pushing that it can no longer be going, let's not rock the boat so that, we can keep the peace and protect the union, even though the abuse still has never stopped. I mean, we know brown and black people in this country have been feeling this abuse for this is not like new to them, right? They've been feeling this for a long time. And so many times people white people have been like, well, it doesn't really affect me yet. So they haven't been pushing that. And I think our Democratic leaders are in that same boat. I mean, a lot of them are beholden to corporations. So they're not going out and pushing. So do you know any organizations that are pushing to really change more than just like, let's get rid of this guy? Trump's not new. He's not an anomaly. He is the same thing we have seen time and time again, right? He's just a greedy fascist person. Fine. How do we actually change that further down the line, right? Long-term, real systemic change. Do you know any group
Yeah.
doing that? Sorry.
Indivisible is. Oh no, that's okay. So Indivisible at the national level is supporting campaigns to primary a lot of senators and representatives who don't deserve their seats. Are you in Colorado or are you in another state?
I'm in Colorado.
Okay, so I'm sure you know that Bennett and Hickenlooper are, as I like to call them, corporate cucks.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
um,
Absolutely.
if y'all don't know, State Senator Julie Gonzalez is running for Hickenlooper's seat, and she is an amazing woman. She is going to be our guest speaker in 2 weeks on February 11th. So I hope y'all can make that meeting. And even if you can't, we'll make sure to record it. But let me put that link so you can RSVP for next week and the 11th. And so she is incredible. And then I know that Bennett's running for governor, and I wholeheartedly support Phil Weiser instead of Bennett. Weiser's filed at least, even last year, last time I checked, he's filed at least 24 lawsuits against the Trump administration. He's done a lot to make sure that our local police aren't collaborating with ICE and
Hmm.
enforce that law. So yeah, Wiser kicks ass. So
Yes,
Indivisible, though, at the national level is running a whole program to make sure that we get a lot of those corporate Democrats out. I completely agree with you that they are just paying lip service to these issues. Like, oh, exactly like you said, we're outraged, and then like they turn around and go sit in their office and start calling their donors.
exactly.
So
Cool.
yeah, definitely that is happening.
Great. I will also check out the Indivisible group that is working towards that as well. Thank you for that.
Yes. Lindy? Lindy, did you want to say something? Your hand just was up and then went down.
I'm sorry. I started speaking without turning off my mute. There was a question early on, quite about 20 minutes ago, from Gary Weiss in the chat that I think is irrelevant to this whole conversation, and also when we're talking about the movement and it growing, how big it is now, and certainly needs to be bigger. It's back up there. How do we take the message to where like-minded people live and work, but might not be ready to demonstrate their resistance to fascism? I think it's just a good question.
Sure. So this Zoom meeting is a great place to bring people to kind of dip their toes in the water and see what's going on with this movement. At least I think it's a great place. And then also just having, heartfelt, emotion-driven conversations with them, especially if these people were maybe in opposition to us. We welcome ex-MAGA folks with open arms. But the best way to convert your Uncle Larry that won't shut the hell up at Thanksgiving is not to throw a bunch of facts at him, but it's maybe to be like, how do you feel about the economy right now? Or how do you feel about, something that he cares about? And give him an opening to talk about it. And you can even say, I don't like what ICE is doing. Do you, without saying like, look what your guy is doing, and things like that. But for folks who are like definitely on our side and wanting to maybe get involved, but they're not ready to go to a protest, I think a Zoom meeting or one of the Indivisible calls. So if you're not on the Indivisible mailing list, you can sign up on their website, and you can also, I'll drop the link for the page with all of their calls and trainings on it. And then, let's see. All right. Yeah, this is it. They redid the website. It's kind of funky. All right. So this link will take you to all of the upcoming Indivisible calls. You can even watch one that's already recorded. You can find that Eyes on Ice document and record. That's a training that the ACLU did on your rights when you're recording ICE and how to handle that. So those are a few ideas for you. All right, next up, your name says Zoom user. You had a cool, like, multicolored picture of what looked like a guy's face. If you're talking, you're muted. Go ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't hear very well. I just had a quick question on the follow-up of what earlier person had asked, which was about like an ongoing protest. Is there any location where consistently, like any time, people can just show up and it's kind of expected that there might be some other protesters there as well?
So we are talking about doing that. Oh, you mean like continually, like 24/7 in one
Exactly.
spot?
Yeah.
No, there is not anything like that. We are working on having the enough people on our leadership team that we can have like bi-weekly protests at the Capitol, so that there is a place where that will be on a regular schedule versus individual events. But there is not a 24-hour protest location. That is a cool idea, though.
Are there any resources what you can do as part of a small business? I feel limited
Um,
as a manager and often worry about my regulars and what I would do if ICE came in.
Yes, so there is business know your rights trainings that happen from time to time, and the next one is on the 31st. So let me get that link to RSVP for you. You can actually go through, if you want, you can go through the whole training and learn how to like canvas businesses about what your rights are. I know that you are allowed to put up a sign that says employees only, and then ICE would need a warrant to go in that area. So a lot of business owners put those up and then can help regulars, get to that area. Let them know when they come in, if this ever happens, here's the door, you can go in here. We have ICE is not welcome here window clings you can put on your sign or on your window on our website that also have a QR code with know your rights information. And that just, it doesn't keep ICE out if your business is open to the public, but it does let immigrants know that they're welcome and ICE isn't. Sarah?
So I just wanted to give you a heads up that when you plan and organize a regular routine of protesting, they also plan and prepare for when you are to come. I was out in DC, was supporting Flair and the vets, and every Monday they go to the Heritage Foundation and they stand outside and they protest. So the Heritage Foundation has now put out these ginormous speakers that just blare music so it overcomes and drowns out what all the protesters are saying. So just keep in mind that if you're not doing pop-ups and you're doing on the regular, that they will also prepare for you to be there and to possibly send out agitators as well. So just
Thank you.
something to keep in mind.
Thanks so much. That was a very good point. Ben?
This is also interesting to hear what people are talking about, because we had 110 people on this call approximately, and these are the most activated people around, right? And we're still asking for people to lead us and take us to other places where we want to be. And I think that's human nature, obviously. But I think the hardest step is from listening and hearing to doing something. That's the hardest step. And once you do something, I think you are primed to do other things. And so I put this in the chat, but there's a very easy one coming up on Saturday. And that's the Tesla protest.
Yeah.
That's a super easy one, right? 11 to 1 Tesla, if you're in Denver on Broadway. I mean, that's just a super easy one. And it is it's not confrontational in that way. There's nobody that's going to be taking your picture there. It's just an ability to do something. And then I think your mind changes, right? Everyone thinks that the mind has to get right to change the body, but it's really the other way around. Your body has to do something and be in action, and then your brain chemistry changes.
Thank you. And that you said is on Saturday?
Yeah, 11 to 1.
Okay. Maybe
It's every Saturday. By the way, it's every Saturday.
Okay. Maybe drop that address in the chat a
Sure.
couple more times before we're
Sure, of
done
course.
in case people missed it. But yeah, so that is a great opportunity, especially since Mr. Musk has decided to start getting involved in politics again. I think we need to ramp those up again to the level they were at when Tesla stocks tanked. All right, I'm gonna grab a couple links from our YouTube channel for y'all.
I put your new songs on my Facebook, and they got like 200 something views.
Hell yeah! I'll play you guys another song here in a second.
How do you know the Flowbots?
I got connected with the Flowbots because Johnny Five started a protest singers group here called No Enemies, and so they will sing protest songs and like teach the crowd protest songs. They actually were up on stage several times at No Kings 2. And I think the plan, hopefully, if everyone's available, will be to do the same thing at No Kings 3. So they are just amazing. Like think civil rights, songs while people were marching. That's the kind of thing that they do. They were with us at the vigil we hosted at the Geo Detention Facility. And we, before Home Depot was blacklisted, we thought the symbolism would be great if we bought 30 Home Depot buckets, and we also brought 30 sets of drumsticks and some megaphones, and our friend brought his powwow drum. And we set up outside of the windows at Geo, where the people are detained inside so that they could hear us. And it was incredible. So Johnny Five was on the megaphone, singing, as well as the other singers. And we had some folks from Notes of Dissent, which is a local protest brass band. They also played on the march at No Kings 2 and at previous protests. So there's some amazing folks. So that was a really powerful action too. And I think we definitely need to get down there. Everybody, have an awesome evening, and we'll see you next week.